we're not here to stifle anyone's creativity. By all means, it's more like a creative spark, and these are options for you. And I'm just going to present you these options and tell you that what you've written there has a carbon impact. It's up to you to decide that this is a really, really important scene and this will make or break your movie. Or up to you to be like, view it as a creative challenge and be like, you know what? I don't actually have to fly to Ibiza for that. I can do that in Cornwall or something. It's not really going to harm my creative output in any shape or form. But I did actually care about, like, I considered sustainability in that as well. And we always put creativity first. Like, we're here to make films. I'm here to make films. I want to watch more sci-fi. Create more sci-fi for me, please. I love it, and fantasy. But ultimately, so we're here to make that. And second of all, if you can make it as sustainable as you can, that's really, really, it's a really good outcome.
Welcome to Filmmaking Framed, your video podcast uncovering the realities of filmmaking. I'm your host, Daniel Hughes.
And I'm your host, Tom Dexter. With us today is Zsófia Szemerédy, co-founder of Green Eyes Productions, a sustainability consultancy that helps productions from film and TV be more environmentally friendly. She's worked with BAFTA Albert, as well as across film sales, distribution, and development. Welcome, Zsófia.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me here.
Great to have you with us. So, when did you first know you wanted to be involved in film and TV?
Hard question. I didn't. I thought I'm going to be a writer. I really liked writing from probably age 5, 6. My grandma has my first written sheets actually, and I thought I might be like an archaeologist or something very cool, like an Indiana Jones in the
I was
late.
going to say, I'm going to guess that you saw Indiana Jones.
Yeah, I was a really big Indiana Jones fan and a Star Wars fan, obviously, as well. And then eventually I was kind of like, do you know what? I really like history and sci-fi. So in high school, I kind of told my parents that I think I'm going to be something like a historical advisor. I wasn't sure that really exists, but turns out it did. And they didn't believe me. And I was like, I'm going to find a university where they teach that. So I did that. And I came to the UK to study history and film, where I actually found out that I don't want to be a historical advisor. I'm sure it's a great job, but I kind of want to be closer to the films itself. And so I started working in film instead.
And so, what was your first role in film and TV?
I'm going to laugh, but I was giving popcorn to people. I worked at a cinema for a good couple of years at Odeon Leicester Square, actually.
Yep.
So I kind of jumped straight into the exhibition side of things, which I didn't know it's called exhibition, and then that sales and distribution, all of that exists. So I came from all the way there. I moved up. If you're listening and you know this, OLS, this is how we called it, Odeon Leicester Square. It's still probably the biggest cinema in the UK in terms of an auditorium, but at the time they haven't renovated it, and we had over 1,700 seats.
Wow.
This is where we actually had our graduation. It's beautiful. I dreamt about like going on that stage and doing something, so it was a nice reward after uni to actually get the graduation there. And this is the cinema where they do all the red carpet premieres as well. So it was a dream come true. You know, all my friends back in Hungary thought that I'm living the life because I'm like, you know, around the red carpet and around the stars and all of that. What they didn't see that I was actually bringing out the blue roll and cleaning up puddles. So no, it doesn't glitter or something. So it was really funny. And then I became a cinema manager at Odeon Panton Street. And I was still going back to Odeon to cover the premieres and stuff. And my final day there was the Star Wars premiere. I was really happy about that.
I think it's quite funny that a lot of people think film is glamorous, but all sides, whether it's working at the cinema or being on a set or, you know, there's the unglamorous side as well. So it's both beautiful, amazing, and rough.
I think I've seen some of the most unglamorous side of filmmaking.
But that's amazing. Of any cinema to be at, that's like the one where you're really getting to see the industry in action. So that inspired you to take your next step. What was after that?
Absolutely, that I think, because all my peers around me, they were from, from a similar background of like, we wanted to do something. So I remember there was a guy who was an opera singer. There was a guy who became a singer. There were a couple of other people who would just ended up working in sales and distribution. So yeah, everyone was inclined to do something about film. We were young and hungry in our 20s. I was just still doing my BA. So I was doing my BA and I was doing the cinema job full time. So, I can live in London and eat.
Survive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically. Kind of have to do all kinds of weird jobs. I've done a lot of weird jobs throughout uni.
And it's worth highlighting that is completely normal when you're breaking into film and TV
Oh, absolutely.
And living in London.
and living in London.
All of us. And it's nice. Like, you work hard, play hard. That's what you do. You go out after with your friends, and then that's when you actually discuss what you're going to do. And then you do some like weird, funny little jobs together. And here you are. Have a career out of that.
And how long after that was it before you went to the National Film Television School?
How long? So I think it was 2 years before the NFTS. I actually applied a couple of times to the NFTS and I didn't get accepted. So that's another thing that I like to tell everyone, that don't give up. Like, apply as many times as you need to. I got through the rounds of interviews because I applied for the producing course and it didn't take me. And I was devastated and really sad and kept applying both for the producing and the screenwriting course. And we had a teacher who I think we shared, Chris Orty, who interviewed me for the producing course, and he told me that, do you know what, there's another course that's just starting now. I think you'd be perfect for that. I was working at Premier PR at the time, so it was a PR firm, and we were doing the London Film Festival, and I was like, I don't know, one of the running assistants, whatever, delegate assistants or something like that, manning a desk for like weeks. And so he told me that, and we were obviously doing 12, 14-hour days. It's like the festival, everything's happening. And I looked up the course and I was like, oh my God, this would be just a perfect course for me. But the deadline's tonight. Like, how am I can't apply. Like, all my previous applications, I spent weeks on it and I didn't get in. Like, how am I going to get into this one? So I think I sent off an email that I really didn't think through. Something like, I'm working at the London Film Festival, but I really want to apply. And I just heard about it. And Chris Orty said, you should come. Can you please, like, bear with me? I'll do my application properly. Something like that. And yeah, got in.
And what's the course called?
It's called Marketing, Distribution, Sales and Exhibition for Film, TV and Games.
And it's a 2-year course. MA.
It is a master course. We were the first year to do it. It was really good. On my interview, I promised to my my course leader, Debbie Rowland, that I might not have the money for the university, but I'll be her best student if she takes me. And she did. And I was actually, then again, I was working at a different place. I was freelancing, so a lot of different jobs. I was working at the London Screenwriters Festival when I got the news that they accepted me, and jumped up. I was really happy. Then I started crying, and my boss was like, "Well, what's wrong?" I'm like, "I got accepted, but I don't have the money to pay for my tuition fee. I've already like taken out all the loans I could for the BA. So how am I gonna go to my dream university? It's like Hogwarts to me. Like, it's literally like fucking magic school." And he was like, "Well, why don't you crowdfund your course? I heard that there was a guy who's done that with NYU." I was like, I can't possibly crowdfund a course. Like, I mean, I think at the time it was £13,000 or something. It was really expensive. Um, and I crowdfunded my course.
Wow.
Not the full amount. I raised about 5.5 grand, and the director of NFTS saw that, so he sent me an email on Christmas Day saying, "We've seen your campaign. We'd like to offer you a place." And I was like, "Okay, thank you." And then they convinced my former employer, Odeon, to give me another scholarship so I can get through year number 1. And then I applied for one more scholarship and then one more, which was the CTBF, the Cinema Television Benevolent Fund, which I can recommend to everyone if you want to break into the industry. I think I was the first one who was doing sales and distribution who ever got that scholarship. And that's how I managed to get through the 2 years, actually.
Which the school must have loved, because what they want is students with that sense of graft and determination. And they're like coming in, hot at the gate. You're already showing that amazing potential as a student for them.
They did say they liked that. I also worked for them in the marketing department after. I think they were like, if you can crowdfund, if you can promote yourself, then you're already showing us that you can be good on this course. So, well, I tried my best. I think I was working the most as a freelancer in my class.
And what were your, tips and strategies for how you're able to make a crowdfunding campaign successful?
Well, I just really wanted to do this course. And I think I leaned a lot on my peers and their advice and the network that I already had, because there was like a little bit of a network I already had throughout the London Screenwriters Festival. And I went to some of the slightly more famous people. That was the writer of Fight Club, I think, who I asked for for like a little bit of a promo so he can say, please support Sophie. And there were other people, some of my former bosses. So I literally went to everyone and was like, I really want to do this, guys. Please help me. I was very honest about it. It was a very vulnerable thing to do. And everyone at home looked a little bit like it wasn't a traditional thing to do in Europe at the time, I think. So they were a bit like, what? You're going to ask people for money? I'm like, yeah.
Well, massive credit to you, because I can imagine, and you talk about it being vulnerable, and I can absolutely see that. And just how hard you worked on it just absolutely comes through.
Thanks. I sometimes I look back at it because it comes up on social media, 'cause it throws up something. I'm like, oh my God, I've done that. But it was worth it.
Yeah.
Every second of it is worth it.
And you're very much a person now that gives back and helps others. And that's obviously a big part of who you are.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I'm trying. I try and remember everyone who helped me throughout the last 10 years, basically. And I know how much it means when, someone just offers their time for a coffee or for like a chat over Zoom now. Because sometimes you can't coffee, you just Zoom. And I try and do that. I think I even put it on LinkedIn, like just reach out and I'll make time. I might not make time next week or next month, but I'll definitely do. And we do get that at Green Eyes a lot as well. I actually really appreciate when someone wants to break into the industry and they take the time to research our company and then they send us like a nice email. And I think that goes a really, really long way. I will definitely sit down with them. I think I've got like hundreds of emails asking students to help with their dissertation, for example. Like there are a lot of dissertation out there about sustainability and film now, I promise.
It's
Yeah.
a good thing. It's a good sign.
It's absolutely a growth topic and something that the industry is taking a lot more seriously than it has in years past.
Absolutely. As a location manager, you probably are more aware of that than anyone else amongst us.
We always encourage throughout our episodes of this podcast anyone to reach out to people and ask for that advice, because or any help. The worst case scenario, they're going to kind of ignore it. And sometimes they're ignoring it not because they're like, oh, this annoying person has reached out to me. Sometimes they ignore it because they're busy. It's definitely worth doing, because I think you say this a lot to me, Daniel, is that they're unlikely to go, that Tom reached out and now I hate that guy. And I will never work with him ever again because he has sent me a nice, polite email.
And there are those people, they do exist, they are very rare. And great, you have now pre-sorted someone who you don't want to work with professionally, because if they will have that reaction over an email, you don't want to be intertwined.
No, I agree. I think like exactly what you're saying, Tom, as well. What's the worst? They're just going to say no. But they might say like half a year later that now I've got some time,
Yep.
and I'm really sorry that I haven't had time beforehand. And I mean, it just shows that you want to do something.
Yeah, they'll often say, "Reach out to me. I'm on a job. I finish in 6 months. Can you reach out to me in the autumn?"
Yeah.
And then as long as you remember to do that, because they're not going to sit there and remember to they got to reach out to you. But if you remember and make maybe a note on your phone or reminder, and then you reach out 6 months later, they'll probably go, "Oh yes, no, I remember. Yeah, great, I've got
I
time."
think that's really important what you're saying, that do make a note or something, because I sometimes say that to people as well. And it will be on them a little bit in that regard that I'm really sorry, we're shooting something now. If you remind me, if you take that extra step again, I'll definitely stay down with you. And I'm not trying to put them through the hoops or something. It's just we're working 12 hours a day, so I can't really fit it in now, but I will make time next time.
I was wondering if I could ask you a kind of cheeky question. So you did marketing, sales, distribution, and exhibition. Some people listen to this might not understand how the industry works.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not going to go into detail on every single one of those segments of the industry, but could you give a brief explanation as to what marketing, sales, distribution, and exhibition entails, what each of those are, like in terms of a film's life cycle?
We're going to be here for a long,
That's why I
long
say it's a cheeky
time.
question, but if you can kind of surmise each one briefly, just so people have an idea when we're talking about it.
Absolutely. And I still love it, by the way. And I still kind of like, well, I'm not missing it, but I keep tabs on it. And we watch this space because we might be doing something with sales and distribution again. I'll start with exhibition because I think that's the closest to everyone, basically. So if you're an audience, you'll experience this because exhibition is everything that like if you go to cinema, we'll say that's part of like the exhibition. I'm probably butchering the whole explanation, but showcasing and getting something to an audience, that's part of exhibition. And marketing, sales, and distribution. So marketing plays a part in everything that we do. I think we can't even separate that at this point. Like it's just so intertwined with all of that. Um, if you think about like how do you hear about a film? It's because someone marketed it, rightly so. This is how you hear about it, right? And this happens, so there are different kind of marketing strategies, but that's a B2C marketing, business to consumer. That's when you hear about it as an audience. But there's also marketing in our industry, which is the B2B, which is the business to business, which we do to each other, company to company. So this is where the sales part comes in. When you go to film markets and film festivals where it's like a fish market, it's just a film market.
Like
You sell your
Cannes and
product.
Berlin and
Yeah,
yep.
exactly. So we go to Cannes, as you're saying, that's the biggest one in Europe. Currently, EFM is attached to the Berlinale, so that's another, it's a very artistic European one. So each market and each festival has their own characteristics as well. And if you're a sales and distribution company, you will know what your agenda is, and what you're buying. So you will have your remit of what you're trying to buy and who you're selling, because you also know your audience really well. I'm not sure I might be getting into details too much here, but basically what happens is then, so if you have to think about it this way, you've got a product, you're going to try and sell that product, and those are the salespeople. So the sales agencies, they will sell it, and they will sell it to distribution companies, who are then your domestic representatives. So a sales company might be selling international rights to different countries, and your domestic distribution company will be distributing it around the country, and they will be the ones who then put it into cinemas.
I think maybe the way to help people understand it is it's say you made, I don't know, a bag of rice and then you've got to sell it to a country's distribution network. So you may be selling it to a warehouse, and then they sell it to a Tesco or Sainsbury's, and that would be your exhibition company. So you've got a product, which is the film, you sell it to a distributor in a country, and then they will then sell it to the cinemas and get it actually released, and they'll also be in charge of its online digital release and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. And there are so many different type of release models. How do you get it to people? If you're just putting it into cinema, if you're just doing the festival circuit, so to say, or if you're doing an online release or a combined version of that. And just to throw in a curveball, not to confuse anyone, but sales and distribution plays a really big role in financing as well, especially now. And the models are shifting right now, how our industry is currently working a little bit. And it used to be that there were separate companies, let's say just a sales company, just a distribution company, and they were specializing in that. But now with the shifting models, everything is becoming more vertical, and a company will do multiple things again. They have to stand on multiple feet, like this is how I'm saying it right. They have to stand on
Yeah, they
multiple feet.
diversify what they're
Yeah,
doing. Yeah.
exactly.
So there's like sales companies that will also be doing development. So they'll get in early on a project and start developing it ready. So they're kind of helping, instead of just saying, yeah, I'll sell your bag of rice, they'll be like, well, what should we bag?
Yeah,
You know,
and
and
I'll
then,
be financing it. I
yes,
like
yeah,
your
put money
rice.
into
I'm
it.
gonna
Yeah.
help you grow that rice.
I don't know why I picked rice, but there you are.
I did hear it. I was in a panel somewhere, one of the festivals, can't remember which one. And I sat in on the distribution panel just to keep myself up to date and all of that. And it was about domestic distribution in Europe. And distribution companies were talking about their worries and how they can still handle the space at the moment because money is disappearing, support is disappearing. And they were all saying that the way forward they think is to go into development a lot. And they start, if you look at the trades now, more and more companies come together and they start development funds together for the kind of genre films that they want to produce eventually because they know their audience really well. So they're almost like grooming the talent for that now.
They know what product they need, so they get in early so they can make sure that that's what comes through the pipeline. Because if they don't, then they're at a whim of what the producers have made and what's in the market, and they can go, oh, there's not that many sci-fis, and I really specialize in distributing sci-fis. And for some reason this year there isn't any, and so yeah, it's just about having that control. And if you have that control, you have a bit better say on how you can monetize and therefore generate revenue for your company.
Absolutely. There's a really fancy job in this whole environment, which is called acquisition. This is what I really wanted to do. I think it's kind of one of those jobs where people have to die out to get a job, and that's when you get in. But I thought it's up. I was an acquisition assistant at two companies for a short period of time, and it was amazing. It's where you read the new scripts, you look at the new talent, you try and seek out the new talent, and so it's very creative from that perspective, but it also has a very tangible finance part of it because you're also looking at sales estimates and you're looking at previous box office numbers. And I really like that combo of like the creative and numbers together. This is a weird thing, but I've always liked it. So I thought this is the perfect meeting point for that.
It's a really great role because, like I say, it is so creative, but it's also very much about your taste. So you're helping. I mean, your taste to an extent. You will be aware of what the market's taste is as well. But there's talk of different sales companies, distribution companies having their taste in film, and often that is driven by not only the CEOs of those companies but also their acquisitions team. So who are the 2-3 people at that company that are choosing what films they sign for is a big part of the taste of that company.
Absolutely. I was actually really sad at some point I didn't get into acquisition properly. And that's when I switched to development. I thought, like, do you know what? I can't get into acquisition. I'll just sit on the other side of the table and I'll do development. And I got a chance to work with Farah at Rockcliffe, which was an amazing 2 years, I think, where she gave me an opportunity to do her like to manage her slate when she was away shooting and things like that. And so I became a development exec from like one day to the other. I didn't know how. And it was a lot of responsibility, but she taught me so much, starting with some of the most basic things, which you wouldn't think someone will have to learn, but they're really important things around like email etiquette and business etiquette and how do you manage things and my favorite bit, admin, like where do you save everything, because if you lose something, if you misfile something, that's lost. She always told me that, and she's super right about that. And I can see that now, especially we're working on 6-7 films a year. If I'm losing a file from one of them, that will mean it's lost forever, so I have to make sure everyone puts it in the right Google folder.
Yeah, when I worked in film finance, it was very important because all those each of those individual documents in a closing of a finance deal is specifically important.
I think people underestimate how important admin is.
I think it's true. It's not just in the behind the scenes business side of this industry. It's on set as well, and maybe you work in production. You need to get the correct paperwork because you've got children working on site, so you need to have the right licenses and you need to have that stored correctly. All the production documents. Even something as basic as having all your purchase orders and have them stored correctly and not losing those. And it's a sort of thing. Everything's moving so fast. So the better you are at just being organized on at that speed, the better you are at your job, really. That was a very big ramble on be on top of your paperwork. So at what point did you think, right, I want to go down the sustainability route? Where did you? Obviously, it's something that's very important, and it's something that's becoming more and more important to productions all the time. When was the point where, for you, Sophie, that you were like, this is something I want to help with the industry with?
Well, it wasn't a premeditated thought or anything at all. It was, I felt a little bit like I try to have a holistic view of the industry. This is why I was like, I took different kind of jobs. So I worked at festivals and PR companies and sales and distribution, all of that we talked about beforehand. Um, and I also had my own distribution summit at some point. So I was always like, I'm going to do my own thing at one day. And I thought like it's really nice to know a lot about film. I felt like I didn't have any experience on set. Like all of these things that we talk about were kind of either at the beginning or at the end of the film chain. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like I know about the financing of a film, but I don't know how it looks like when they shoot it. Like this is just weird. I'm a hypocrite. I should go on set. I should learn about that too. So I called up a producer who gave my reference to me when I went to the NFTS. She's a Hungarian producer. She's really famous. She's done a lot of stuff. And I asked her for a job, and she gave me a job. I already had a full-time job at the time, so I only took my holidays. It was a 3-week pickup shoot, so I went back to Hungary for this show. It was The Hunt. That was my first time I went on a really, really big set. And now I realize it probably wasn't even the biggest one. So we only had about 300 people. I've been on bigger sets since then.
Could I interrupt just to ask, coming from having done all of that finance, sales, distribution, exhibition, was there something that really stood out for you when you were on that first set that you were like, oh, I didn't realize this was quite how it was? What was your immediate observations then suddenly being in that production phase?
Everything was new. Everything was like, oh my God. Okay, I know what was the weirdest thing. And this is still weird to me every single day, that despite all the preparations, how unprepared and crazy everything is when you're there. And still it works. I think that was the biggest thing to me, that something will come out of that crazy mess. And people kind of know what they're doing. It's like a well rehearsed, yet chaos, unorganized.
An experienced
So,
crew are
yeah.
experts at doing the job regardless of what's thrown at them.
I think I was like, oh my God, I couldn't believe that will happen. That's what's happening on a set. Like, how did they know? Like, they didn't know yesterday where we're going to shoot tomorrow, and they still know what to do. It was mad. It was really mad. I was in a lucky position because I didn't have to do anything super difficult. I was the personal assistant of the New York producers, so I actually had a really good seat for everything. On my first day of the job, I was allowed into the video village because I was carrying their coffee and everything, and I could just sit with the showrunners and listen to their conversations.
Can you explain what Video Village is for people who aren't familiar?
Yes, it's the black little tent where the producers, showrunners, all the important people are watching on a camera what the camera is actually shooting right now. So they'll be observing what's happening, and they'll be discussing if it's good or not, what they have to do, have another take or something like that. And I was like, oh my God, this is gold. I should just soak up every word they're discussing between each other and understand and remember this for the rest of my life. It was really fun. And so on that job, I also realized that there's a lot of waste, which you both will be very aware of that. And I was like, so what happens to the waste? And why are they not recycling it? I was like, I'm recycling at home. We all are. Like, this is natural. So why are they not recycling on set? And I was just really, really upset about it. And funnily, at the same time, after that job, I think just a week later, I came back to do my job, and I went on an evening seminar on film financing, which was organized by an amazing group, by the way, which I can recommend to everyone. It's Lift, Ladies in Film and Television. They do really nice events. It's one of the best groups I know. And so I went on this film financing seminar, and that was Rosaire, who worked for BAFTA Albert at the time. And she was talking about sustainability and the connection to sustainability and financing and films. And it just blew my mind. I was
Can you
like, oh my
explain to the listeners or the audience what BAFTA Albert is?
Yes. BAFTA Albert is an organization, part of BAFTA. BAFTA is a non-profit organization, and BAFTA Albert is the side organization that looks after the industry in terms of sustainability. They created a tool, which is a carbon calculator, that measures the production's carbon footprint. And they also do a lot of seminars, and they try and educate the whole industry basically how to be more sustainable. And they also try and set standards. They're governed by basically all the broadcasters, streamers, and studios all together. So it's an industry initiative. And so this lady Rosaire, who was my colleague after, or like sort of, we switched places at BAFTA right after each other, but everyone in sustainability, there's not many of us. So everyone who works in sustainability is like a colleague, basically. And so she really inspired me. And after seeing that set back in Hungary, the hunt and all the waste, and by the way, I just want to make sure, like, it's like every set is, I just happened to be on that one, so it's not them that were particularly bad or anything. It's just how the film industry worked.
It seems to be one of the last things on people's mind is
Yeah.
recycling. Everyone's just so busy doing what they're doing, they just throw stuff, waste everywhere. If you're lucky, there's a bin and they put it in a bin, but then that bin just gets taken all to the same general
Well,
waste.
it used to be.
Used
We
to be,
changed that now.
yeah. It's much better, much better.
And basically, I was like, oh my God, so this is a job. Someone can do this. I've been in the industry by then, I think, for like 5 years, 6 years, 7, I don't know if we count the cinemas. And I was like, I never heard of this. You can actually do this somewhere. So I also met my business partner at the time, and we started emailing a lot of studios. I was like, well, she's got connections in Hungary and Canada and some other places. I've got loads of connections in the UK. So we reached out to a lot of the studios who I worked with when I was pitching for them from a development perspective, because I Googled them and I was like, I know it's not going to be you who knows about sustainability, but I do know that the larger organization you're working for cares about it because it's on your website. So can you point me to the right direction? And then there were a couple of really nice producers and execs who sat down with us and they talked to us about sustainability then. I was like, wow, this is amazing. And guess what? One day we got an email from Marvel
Wow.
saying, we heard that in Europe, you're the two girls who ask a lot of questions around sustainability. We've got a job for you. I'm like, okay, we'll take it. We were like really upfront. We've never done this. Like, we've never done this job. We come from really different backgrounds. Are you still okay for us to take this job? We'll promise we'll be good at it. We'll learn everything on the job. They're like, sure, the job is yours. So they obviously don't have enough money. Again, that's always a big question. So we split our first salary. We were on a PA salary. We split it for 8 months. And that was Marvel's Moon Knight.
Wow.
Actually, I mean, I've worked on a couple of Disney and Marvel things, and they are probably one of the best companies for pushing sustainability.
They're really good
Mm.
at that.
And take us through, what was your day to day like on Moon Knight?
Well, Moon Knight, we were still learning a lot. I'm still learning a lot every day, so that hasn't changed. We started with the waste, as that's the most obvious thing, I think, for everyone. And so we were looking at how we can integrate recycling into the whole into the film industry's lifeblood, basically. And we came across a lot of walls, and everyone was like, this is not going to work. You can't do this. This is someone else is doing this bit or that bit. And everyone was very protective around their own field. So we were trying to charm everyone into it. And kind of with that came the whole mind shift change as well, and the education. We were educating ourselves and we were educating the crew. Everything came from each other. So we started doing one thing. We ended up doing something completely different the next day, and we managed to carve out a little budget for us. And so we were managing that first budget of like what we're going to do with that. And then they saw we're really struggling, so from that budget we were allowed to hire some PAs for the department. And then on, it just welled up and welled up. And then I reshuffled the budget a couple of times. I showed that we had some savings in some areas. And then I asked the production manager that, look, if we already have this budget assigned to us, can I just shuffle some lines and spend it on something else? And they're like, sure, you can. If the total doesn't change, do whatever you want. And so we managed to trial some batteries, which they were really against at the beginning because they thought it's going to cost them a lot. But since we had some savings, we might as well do it. So we've done that on a couple of shows. Like, I find that sometimes it's not good to go in like guns blazing and be like, we're going to change everything right now. But you carve out a little bit. You show that you're really good at what you're doing. You gain the trust, and then you push it further and take it a little bit
Because you're
further.
trying to change habits.
Yeah.
So if you can get the habits, small habits that are improving in the right direction, I guess then eventually you get someone who just doesn't even think about it. They just recycle.
Yeah.
Because I guess when they introduced recycling for the first time, just general recycling, people would have been like, oh, I'm just going to put everything in the same bin. And then eventually now people don't even think about it. That's recycling. That's not recycling.
You just do what you do. It's almost like normalization. Yeah. Like, we're going to replicate your life at home in a little bit like that way.
A big example I can think of. So when I first worked on a film set, like a professional paid one, was 2016, and we had massive containers full of water bottles, and just like plastic water bottles, and people would just grab one, drink a little bit, forget which one was theirs, grab another one. And my job, and that was in locations, was just to go around and pick up water bottles. But we didn't have recycling, so all these water bottles, we'd pour out the water and put them in the bin. So that meant these huge containers of water. First of all, I think only 30% of that water would be drunk by actual people, and then also all that plastic would be waste. And then even 2-3 years later, everyone uses water pumps, and everyone brings in their own bottles. And so just the amount of plastic that's being wasted is gone. And then I think especially at the junior levels, the turnover of like new people coming into the industry, especially because we had a boom for a while, you get a lot of new people in and they can't even remember a time where everyone just got plastic bottles. And so if you just introduce these small improvements, it just becomes the norm. That's what you have on a film set.
Absolutely. I mean, I think more people are aware of water footprint now. We've got a carbon footprint, but we also have a water footprint. And so imagine all that water that you were just throwing out, basically pouring out. I mean, we can save that water. There are other people who don't have enough water. So we're trying to do a lot of education with sustainability. And I always say that it's too late to start when you go into production. Like, our busiest period in terms of like the actual sustainability on productions is the prep period. We should have everything set and in order by the time we start shooting. It means like in that like 12-week leading up to it, usually, well, we're going to vet all the suppliers and vendors. We're going to make sure they're not greenwashing, they're right, they have a green policy and all of that. We're going to talk to all of them. We're going to put in place the right type of recycling and compost system. We're going to talk to every single department. Now we're doing a lot of education for head of departments, the directors, the producers, HODs on generally, and we're going to prepare a lot of communication for the crew as well, so everyone knows why it's happening and what's happening to them and what are the basic requirements. It's on some productions now, it's even in their deal memo or the principal deal. What's that? Deal in principle. Sometimes they put in a wording saying, "This is going to be a sustainable production. Please be on board with it," or say it now. But then you don't.
Or you're in
buy it.
breach of your, or you're in breach of your contract.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's, you do all that work in the prep as well, because once you're in the shoot, if you haven't set those systems in place, there's so much chaos, as you said, so many things happening that, you know, say an AD, their focus is on getting the day, the director's thinking about the shot, like what the actors are doing, the DOP's thinking of the lighting in the shot, and the last thing they might think of is, did I remember to recycle my lunch? And so if you get it in place beforehand, then they don't have to be thinking about it because they just know it's going to be there and what they have to do.
And absolutely, and there's so much that everyone, we don't even see that are happening behind the scenes. So we're talking about waste now because that's the most obvious thing that every crew member will notice. And we're talking about, food containers and compost and the water bottles, but they're a very small part of your carbon footprint. Energy is a much bigger part of your carbon footprint. If you think about, and it's not even the lights. Everyone was like immediately say, "Oh yes, the lights that we're using," and yes, we're using a lot of lights, but it's almost not even the lights. Sometimes, yes, the 18K tungstens will be tough on your carbon footprint, but it's usually your unit base and the generators that productions tend to use on unit basis. Now, I do have to say that from where I'm talking, I tend to work on some of the Band 3, Band 4 productions and the tentpole blockbusters. Because with my company, we either work in the UK or we work on service productions in Hungary.
For any of the audience that don't know, what is Band 3 and Band 4?
There are 4 bands in the UK categorizing the size of your production, both from a financial perspective and from a crew size perspective, I think. No?
Just financial,
Financial?
but per hour produced.
Per hour? Okay.
Yeah, or if for TV it's per hour, and then for film it's total production spend.
So the crew size will be impacted because if it's a smaller budget, it'll be a smaller crew.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. Sometimes when I look at the back to rates and stuff, I think they also include like, the smaller crew size, but that's probably because of the budget thing. And so we tend to work on the larger ones because the studios are the ones who can afford doing sustainability. Now, I do want to encourage everyone that no one should be like, worried that if it's a smaller budget, then it can't be sustainable. Smaller budget films and shows are inherently more sustainable. Big budget just means you're buying more of everything and you're using more of everything and more people are working on it. So, yeah.
And you have more money to build in redundancy into the system.
Yeah.
So because cost is not constraining you, you can allow your purchases to run more wild than if you were already on a smaller budget.
That can be a lot more waste. When I say waste, I don't mean physical waste. I mean like waste of time sometimes or waste of resources.
and energy and
Of course, never on any production I've worked on.
Never on any I worked on either.
Of course.
nor me.
But there are productions where they're like, well, we have money, so we don't need to know what we're doing. We will just film and then decide we didn't want that scene, and we will. I mean, like, you hear of massive movies that will do reshoots costing $100 million, and you're like, that's $20 million movies right there.
That can happen for so many reasons as well, to be honest. Sometimes I don't think it's because they didn't know what they want to do or they haven't planned it. Maybe it just doesn't work out. You never know. And a lot of things I'm not aware of, especially as a sustainability person. At the beginning, especially, I wasn't really allowed to sit close to the fire or gain insight into budgets or anything. But as we're approaching the 3rd year with the company now, and we've done more and more projects, and I think we've proved ourselves, and sustainability itself in the whole industry is becoming a more vibrant and acknowledged. Well, we're actually an acknowledged department now. Like we're
You
a
exist.
Department. Yes, thank you very much. We have coordinators, trainees. We have coordinators, PAs, trainees on the show, on multiple shows, different shows at the same time. And so now it's almost like, I think maybe, and hopefully people will not gonna throw stones at me for saying this, but it's almost like that it's sustainability, and some part of it is going towards a sustainability unit managing, producing certain things. It might be in the future, in the next 10 years, there might be someone who says that I'm a sustainable producer, and it will mean, that they're looking at their film very sustainably from the start. Like, we already reached a point where we look at scripts, and I do sustainability script reports on scripts, and they take that into account, and they will.
Can you go into some detail into
Yeah.
that?
Sure. It's quite a new thing. I really like it. I wanted to do it from the first moment we got into sustainability, because I was always in love with scripts, obviously. And so I was like, maybe we can marry these two things. And then I thought it is actually really justified to do it, because when they brought us on board in the past, it would have been like, I don't know, week -8 or something, and they already had all their sets built, and they already had everyone sorted for the production, all the plans, in motion. They know which country they're going to shoot in, how much they're traveling, how they're traveling. All of that was in motion.
For people
And
listening, week -8 means you are 8 weeks from the first week of shooting.
And so I was like, well, it's a bit like you've got a bleeding wound and I'm putting a plaster on it, and I'm not treating it from I'm not treating your illness. I'm just treating your symptoms. And in my view, if you start looking at sustainability at script stage, you can really look at like the impact of sustainability. And so you can look at the content from a script perspective. So you can look at what the audience will see and how you can weave sustainability into it. It has a lot of different elements. Like with certain genres, it's very obvious how it can work really well. So if you think about sci-fi, nicest genre, it really hands itself to sustainability. Think about Silo, Ready Player One, anything where there's a disaster, and then the backdrop is a disaster, some kind of disaster, and then you're in the future and you're trying to solve it. Like almost all sci-fi has that. So it's pretty nice. But with a historical drama, it's much harder to try and weave sustainability into the story. So
Why is that?
because it's set in the past.
So you're talking about when sustainability is actually a topic within the film,
Yeah.
rather than you're assessing the film for how the production can be
Yes.
sustainable.
Sorry, I'm like running ahead. I'm not really explaining it nicely. So you can look at sustainability in a script from a content perspective and storyline and plot perspective. And when you're reading the script, you can also look at it from a behind the screen perspective. So you can look at it like, what's the impact of this scene? What's the impact of my words here? Let's say the impact of those words is that you have to build 5 more sets, or the impact of those scene is that you have to fly to 3 different countries and you're flying out 300 people on each occasion. That will have a really large impact on your carbon footprint. And I think very often the creators, the writers, the script editors, everyone who's involved in that phase are not thinking about it that way. So no one wants to have a really, really large carbon footprint. I'm not going to create a show to have a really large carbon footprint. Now, that's not my goal. It's just a side effect that we don't think about with all these things. Oh, I'm traveling, I'm flying, I'm building sets, I'm using a lot of energy, I'm shooting at night, I'm using a lot of lights for that, all that kind of stuff. So I think if you just connect the dots in people's mind, you can really preempt what's about to happen. There was a university actually where they asked a lot of writers if they have changed their script because the producer asked them to change it for financial reasons. And all the writers said, yes, obviously. I've been asked to change my script before because I haven't got enough money. I have to change the scene. All good. I'm not surprised by that. And then they asked them, like, have you changed your script because of sustainability considerations? Like, what do you mean? Why would I change my script for sustainability considerations? What kind of sustainability considerations? And I think that's where it comes in, that law of education and just connecting the dots. And surprise, it comes hand in hand with finance as well. Like if you start doing sustainability really early on, it will mean that you can save money. If you start doing it super late, you're just increasing your budget. There's that correlation, in my view.
And it makes complete sense that, if you're thinking about international travel, filming across countries can be very expensive. Um, Obviously, there's a big carbon impact on that as well. If you're thinking about the nature of the sets, which will require more building and so on, again, obviously, big savings both financial and from sustainability perspective there. What do you say to people who would, whether it's at a script stage or slightly further, view it as kind of an attack on their creativity? Because it makes complete sense to me that you have all these screenwriters who have made financial considerations but have never even considered sustainability. But there is that, while on the whole is a very collaborative medium, there is certainly a bit of tension between the, on one hand, so-called creatives, and on one hand, so-called money, logistical people. And there can be times where creatives view those kind of financial constraints as almost like personal constraints. So I'm imagining you have run into at least a degree of difficulty with people going, well, I have to care about money. Now I need to think about, I can't just film my movie all over the world, but I want to do that. And talk a little bit if you've experienced that, which I would imagine you have, but I can't speak for you.
I have, sadly, but I think it's nothing new under the sun. So I try and draw on my experience as a normally as from like development, because you have to nurture the writers. You always have to nurture the writers and the creatives. I myself secretly write, so I will treat them how I want to be treated, and I'll try and make sure from the beginning and make it clear that we're not here to stifle anyone's creativity. By all means, it's more like a creative spark, and these are options for you. And I'm just gonna present you these options and tell you that what you've written there has a carbon impact. It's up to you to decide that this is a really, really important scene and this will make or break your movie. Or up to you to be like, view it as a creative challenge and be like, you know what? I don't actually have to fly to Ibiza for that. I can do that in Cornwall or something. It's not really going to harm my creative output in any shape or form. But I did actually care about, I considered sustainability in that as well. And we always put creativity first. Like, we're here to make films. I'm here to make films. I want to watch more sci-fi. Create more sci-fi for me, please. I love it, and fantasy. But ultimately, so we're here to make that. And second of all, if you can make it as sustainable as you can, that's really, really, it's a really good outcome.
I think that's a really brilliant piece of advice, which is to consider, don't write high carbon scenes for no reason.
Yeah.
Choose to use the carbon for scenes that are crucial. That's brilliant.
There will be scenes that you have to write. You will have to write a helicopter sometimes. I mean, it will be valid, and I will watch that film. Like I watch a lot of sci-fi and fantasy, and those are probably high carbon footprint shows. I have to say that historical movies, high carbon footprint as well. Think about the costumes. Think about the sets, the set builds, all of that. It doesn't my job doesn't mean we don't want those shows to be created at all. We just want to make sure that they're more consciously created, if that makes sense. And I think this is the difference, or this is where it becomes a challenge for sustainability companies who don't work in our medium or in our industry, because I don't have a formal sustainability education. I made that clear. Now I'm learning it as I go along as well. But there are a lot of companies, who perhaps work outside of our industry, and they will only look at the carbon, and not the creative side.
And that's your advantage, is that you have looked at development, you have looked at exposition, so you can talk to various stakeholders, showing that you understand their perspective. Because you're right, both from a sustainability and occasionally from a risk assessment perspective, when you get people who are coming and they've not worked in the industry before, they can sometimes miss that, like, the most sustainable production would be no one films that particular movie.
Absolutely.
And the same way, the most risk-free production is the production that doesn't film. So these are always considerations to be managed, and how valid, how important, how to achieve, how safely, securely, with the minimum sustainable impact. And as I say, when you get people outside the industry, sometimes they fail to account that it is one facet of an overall picture.
It's like how the best way to avoid divorce is not getting married.
Yeah.
So if someone comes in and says, I know how to avoid 100%, you'll never get divorced.
Yeah.
Don't get married.
Yeah.
So, what if we wanted to get married? What would your advice be for a healthy marriage? That's the difference.
Yeah.
I agree. It can be really funny that a lot of people would be super scared when you say that you'd like to make this more sustainable. They'll immediately feel like you're taking away their choices, you're imposing something, you're forcing something onto them, or it can come from an insecurity that they've been doing this job for a decade, 2 decades, whatever, 50 years. Some people have been doing their job for 50 years. They're really good at it. And here comes some young person who'll tell them to do it completely differently. And even though they agree with the sentiment, they might be scared of like, but I don't know how to do that. So I want to make sure I can help the others, like I can help everyone else how to do it, because there are a lot of things I'm not going to know how to do it either, but we'll sit down, we'll get in experts, we'll try and work out a solution together. So for example, switching to battery technology currently is one of the biggest things that the industry is trying to do, and it is going. Okay, let's say that. Like, we're further down the road than we were 3 years ago, but it's still not a very solid solution there yet. And so I was sitting through a PPM the other day, and which is a pre-production meeting, which is a really long meeting, 4 hours. You talk through all the scenes, and there's a particularly vulnerable set, which is where they actually had to employ an environmental advisor who advised them you're not allowed to use generators because of the sound and noise pollution and impact of the environment. And the teams were already like, sure, we'll use the battery set. And they were very keen and they knew how to solve that. But when you posed a question to them that, could you do this for the rest of the show? They'll be like, what? What do you mean? I want my diesel generators for security, because it makes everyone feel safer. Because if you stop shooting for a second, that will cost millions of dollars. So there's a really big transition to be had in front of us. The things that are helping, the things that are hindering. But I think the most important thing, like with my company as well, that I don't say we're the experts at all. We'll be there to facilitate everything and talk it through with the others. And if you raise a question, we'll try and find the best solution for you. And I will know who to call, who will have the right answer. I will know the person who can walk around with us and say, this is where you put in the right kind of distribution board that will actually measure your energy output, not just, it will just do what it should do, a distribution box, because it's quite a unique thing now. They're called Erica boards, actually. You put it in instead of a normal distro box, and it will give you a graph with a perfect numbers of like what kind of energy you use throughout the entire shoot. And it's amazing because we have estimates of what we're using at unit base, and we have estimates of what we're using on set, but everyone's always overestimating to be secure. And then they'll be like, okay, I think we're running out of power, so I'm just going to bring in a third generator. But if you know the exact numbers, you can be like, okay, I'm sure that we'll be fine with just one generator, or with a smaller one, or with a battery pack, or with a hybrid. There's so many new technologies. Sorry, I'm getting very...
No, you are absolutely right, because particularly because you work on a production, and when it comes to an end, you as the HOD will hand in a budget, and you'll get all the purchase orders, you get people paid, and then obviously everyone goes off payroll. So it is not a system that incentivizes autopsies to go, and where in my budget, where in the production's budget, was money wasted? And if you don't have enough power for set and filming is disrupted, people will go apeshit. So if you get extra power, because there is also where it makes sense to have more generators than are used, so that if a generator goes down, you can swap one out without it disrupting. So that it's,
which is more common than you would think. Like
Yeah.
we had a show where the heat is actually an issue.
Yeah.
40 degrees. I think 2 generators burnt out because they heat themselves from the inside as well.
So it's a make a calculation on what's required, and then you overestimate slightly over that, and you will be penalized way harsher if you overestimate insufficiently compared to if you waste money, fuel, carbon by overestimating too much. So having these tools to go, what is the actual number that is required, and then I can do a degree more than that, rather than I'm estimating and I'm not that sure, so let me overestimate. So I've got redundancy in the
I
system.
think you've really touched upon the biggest issue of our industry, and that's like one of my passion subject, which is we should be looking at it holistically. And it's not you and me who will need to look at it holistically. It's the streamers and it's the studios who need to look at it holistically. We know they've got slates, right? For the next 5 to 10 years, they know what they're coming out with. Maybe they haven't announced it, but they've got things in the works. You also know they're making films for different slots. So you're making it, if you're TV, you're making it for, the daytime slot, evening slot. You're making it you're looking for the next Game of Thrones or something like that. And if you're a streamer, you'll be looking at seasonally, you'll be looking at your Christmas season, your summer breakout, you'll be looking at your spring and autumn romantic comedy. So you know kind of what kind of films and series will come up. Obviously it will change with the trends, but there is a plan. And we also know that some of these large studios and streamers, they lease out the soundstage studios. So Pinewood, Shepperton, the rest of them, they're booked out for one studio for the next 5 to 10 years, right? So why on earth are we not looking at it holistically and sustainably? Think about it. Like I worked, like in Hungary, for example, the past 4 or 5 years, I worked at the same studio, soundstage studio, sorry, not to confuse everyone, and the same studio came back to shoot their different films, but they haven't invested in that soundstage studio. What about investing in it? Like, you're going to be shooting there for the next 5 years. How about you put some solar panels on? How about you build some EV chargers and you actually build out the infrastructure that you're demanding? Because it's also not okay to demand an industry to change overnight but not have the infrastructure. Who's going to pay for that adaptation?
Yeah, but you're right, because productions will budget. So it's like Disney will form a limited company, or Netflix will, or Apple, for the basis of that production, and that production will get a budget from the parent company. And so it will be that all these productions film at a parent studio, like a Pinewood, like a Shepperton, and they will all have a respective cost. And if that production were to invest in the studio and bring in solar panels and so on, it would massively inflate that production, and then all these other productions would benefit, but it would be seen as a massive spend from the production that invested. So you get penalized for thinking about future productions.
That's why I think the people on the top should be thinking very holistically and looking at their own internal budgets like that, and kind of making sure, like in the long run, it will pay off. But this is the issue. Sometimes at the front end, you have to invest. And then when it will come back at the tail end.
Paying a little bit of devil's advocate.
Go ahead.
Because so as well as doing location management, I've had kit, and people would say, why don't you buy volt stacks? Which, for people who don't know, is electric generators that get used on set. They're about 5 kilowatts, and they're fantastic. They're silent. They don't cause any fumes. So much more popular with residents when you're, charging a truck overnight, for example. And people would say, why don't you buy them? You like to invest in kit. And at the time, they were £20,000 to purchase. And they rent out at £550 per week. So 2 weeks, £1,100. And I would go, I think it's fantastic that they are coming in, but this is a technology that is improving.
Yeah.
So what if in 6 to 12 months we get Voltstacks 2.0 and they cost 10,000, and in that 6 to 9 months, say I've rented it out for 8,000, well then I
But
will
this
be
is why you shouldn't be buying it, and this is why the production shouldn't be buying it, but the larger parent company should be looking at investing. Because what I find sometimes interesting, that and this is good, by the way, that large companies will have their sustainability policies and their sustainability mandates. Fantastic. But how do you deliver that if the infrastructure is not there? Like, if you're mandated to only use trains, but in the UK they're privatized, right? So no one can afford that. From a sustainability perspective, that's not good. I want to sit on that train, but sustainability is not just environmental sustainability. It's also social sustainability. It's mental health, well-being, all of that, and it's classist if we're expecting that you're going to be paying for that train ticket. Like, we have to make sure that it's available for everyone. And how do you do that with all technologies? So if you mandate that you can't fly, and all that kind of stuff, I think it's also your responsibility to some degree to help the transition for the industry. And so I've been advocating a lot for that. There should be an industry pool, where they're actually helping from like a larger perspective. So think about the grid cabinets. You might came across them. This is becoming very technical, but they Film London, and I can't remember who were the other supporters, but they had this scheme, the grid project, where they built a grid cabinet in Victoria Park. And they picked Victoria Park because it was a frequent unit-based location. So every day of the year, there would be films shooting there, which means generators are running at the heart of the city. So they looked at it. They invested about £20,000, £40,000. I'm not sure, but in terms of the larger picture, it was peanuts for that. And now you've got house power. Basically, you've got the grid. You don't have to bring in a generator. What does it mean? You're not renting out a generator. You're not paying for a person to manage that. You're also not paying for the fuel, and you're not harming the citizens and your crew, because the smoke and everything that comes out of those generators, they're not great.
No, absolutely.
So that when I'm saying there should be an industry pool of money and finance available, I'm thinking about these kind of incentives, that there could be more grid cabinets. Like, we want an EV, an electric transition, right? Where are the chargers? How affordable are they? From a health and safety perspective, you're not allowed to use diesel run plants on stage. So genie booms, forklifts and all that kind of stuff. So they have to be electric. Still, not many company are manufacturing them or producing them. So even if the production who I'm working for, let's say, wants to go diesel free, it's going to be a really big challenge to find everything that's electric. And as you're saying, these technologies are still developing, so we should support them, that they can develop faster. But who's going to support them? Sorry, loads of questions.
No, I love your passion, and you are absolutely right at looking at it from a holistic perspective, because
if there was a subsidy for you as a kit supplier to buy electric generators, then that would be doing exactly that, because then you'll have them to supply them.
There should be a governmental subsidy for that.
So then these suppliers can buy up all the electric or sustainable equipment and
I
it out.
I want to say plenty of people have bought them, and they are coming on set, and they are loads. That was just a rationalization, because from my side.
Yeah. It's changing a lot, to be honest. Like 3 years ago, it was quite rare to have batteries now. And everyone knew about the Voltstacks because they were the biggest pioneers. But now, if you think about it, there are in the electrical department, the Instagrid, the teeny tiny battery cases. Everyone's using them. They're very popular. All electric departments have it. There's the Wattman now, which is a very cool battery. I can send you a list of batteries.
Please
by
do.
the way. It's really good. SFX and camera and the IT likes it because it's a 6 kilowatt and it's only 70 or 80 kilos compared to a volt stack that's about 150 kilos. So you can really push it around on set. So there are certain like considerations in terms of like mobility and weight, but where it can really hinder production. So there can be a head of department who'll say, like, okay, so my boyfriend is a gaffer actually, and I usually run my ideas past him, and he'll explain a distro box and phases and stuff to me at home. So it's how I spend that time, and I usually run it past him, and he'll be like, okay, but honey, be realistic. Like, I'm like running up and down on flights, like 10 flights. There's no lift or something. I'm carrying heavy light. Do you think I'm going to carry that battery with me? I'm like, okay, probably you're not going to do that. And so it's sometimes really nice to sit down with those head of departments, coordinators, PAs, everyone who knows their craft really well and understand why the equipment didn't work or why a solution that we thought of didn't work, because they'll tell you the realities, and then you can go into it next time and find the right one for them, because you listen to like, okay, so it was too heavy, it needs to be on wheels, like we have a tricky location, they're going to have to bring a generator, but it can't be like it can't be towed, so it has to be on a Land Rover or something. And then you're going to start thinking, how am I going to put my battery on a Land Rover so it can replace that generator? Anyhow, loads of things around that.
I think it's awesome, and you're absolutely thinking about this the right way.
Well, I hope so, and I really hope the whole industry will think about it this way. And maybe like it's a good final thought here of like finance, that there are some countries, and we hope that the UK will join them too eventually, who actually give financial support now if you're shooting your production more sustainably. So shout out to Austria, New Zealand, Germany with their mandates, Slovakia, and anyone else who's thinking about it. I think the Belgians also have a little bit of an incentive there. So they provide a financial incentive for productions to be more sustainable. And that's something that I think you need at this stage. You really do, like, because producers will want to do it, HODs want to do it. We've done so many surveys where we ask, like, what's stopping you doing it? The two most frequent answers are time and money. And money is time, so money.
Usually what stops any kind of progress.
Yep.
Plus, so I had two final questions. And they're similar, but for me they're a bit distinct. The first is, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received personally? It doesn't need to be related to film and TV.
Well, that was something like, a no is just a no until you turn it into a yes.
That is absolutely the case, and I'd say your life experience is a testament to that.
Thank you. I live by that.
And the second is, if you when someone starts working on a production, and you get the radio and you get the briefing and they get the thing, when they're driving on the way to set, if there was a giant billboard that people had to drive past with a message on it, what would you want that to be that for all crew to see on their way to work?
Ooh, that's tough. I expected a different answer. I was thinking that. I was prepping it on the train here. What would be that one message? Maybe it would be something like, before every decision you make, think about sustainability as well. Just factor it in.
Would be certainly a lot better for what productions, the impact we have on a kind of global perspective.
I hope so.
Thank you so much for coming in. This has been absolutely fucking awesome.
Thank you so much for having me here, and I really hope your next production will have sustainability consultants and you reduce your carbon footprint.
I will definitely share your details with the next head of production at work.
Thanks.
Amazing. Thank you so much.